Once upon a time, there was an island in Africa where only women lived. Long ago, men and women lived there together. Every year, the men would hear mysterious voices calling them from the volcano, and they would go there. Every man and boy on the island would leave to perform a special ritual at the volcano for a week. But one year, something strange happened. The men went to the volcano and never came back. The women waited and waited, but the men were gone. The women felt very sad and confused because they had lost their husbands, fathers, brothers, and sons. They wondered if God was angry with the men and took them away. The women mourned their loss, but soon realized they had to take care of everything on the island by themselves. Without the men, the women organized themselves and did all the jobs the men used to do. They worked hard to build their houses, bury their dead, and plant their crops. Far away from this island, in another land, lived two best friends named UJ and Gar-you. They were both married but repeatedly committed adultery, causing families in their village to break apart. This upset the village elders, who unanimously decided to banish the friends, leaving their children and wives behind. After wandering for a day without food, UJ and Gar-you began to realize the consequences of their actions. They were hungry, weak, and tired, longing for their families and the comfort of their homes. They wandered for days, both by land and by sea. Eventually, they fell into a deep sleep and, upon waking, found themselves surrounded by many beautiful women. They thought they were dreaming. Though initially afraid, they soon relaxed as the women were very kind and hospitable. The women took UJ and Gar-you to the chief and the traditional leader of their village. The leaders, shocked at the sight of the two men, revealed that it had been years since they had seen a man. The chief then asked the men why they had come to their village. At first, UJ and Gar-you claimed they were lost, but the chief, sensing deceit, asked them again, "Why did you come to our village?" Hesitant and frustrated, the men finally admitted the real reason. They had been banished from their old land due to their promiscuity. They promised that if given another chance, they would not repeat their mistakes. The chief and traditional leader accepted their plea, welcomed them to the village, and provided them with separate houses, food, clothes, and servants. UJ and Gar-you were amazed by the number of beautiful women in the village. They started to feel like getting kicked out of their old village was a blessing. Soon, women began visiting their houses late at night. At first, UJ and Gar-you didn't know how to react because they didn't want to be kicked out again, especially from such a nice village. But the women assured them it was a blessing from God that brought them there, as they had all secretly prayed for men to come. Before long, UJ and Gar-you went back to their old habits of being with many women. This time, it was even easier, and they enjoyed every bit of it. They spent their time with different women, and everyone seemed happy, following the men's schedules. They were living their best life, wearing nice clothes made by the women, drinking the best wine, eating the best food, and most importantly, they didn't have to work because the women took care of everything. One night there was a mix-up. The chief and the traditional leader both wanted to be with UJ that night. The chief brought the best wine and snacks to UJ's house, not knowing the traditional leader was already there. These women didn't have a schedule, so they both wanted the other to leave. They started to insult each other and eventually began to fight. UJ broke up the fight, but the news spread throughout the island. If you found this story as chilling as we did, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more spine-tingling tales. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. The next day, there was another fight at Gar-yu's house, when the assistant chief and the chief cook met. That's when the village elders realized they had a big problem in their once very peaceful island. A meeting was called. The women were all worried about what was happening to their once peaceful village. Some said the problems were because of old grudges, while others said it was due to lack of respect. Nobody wanted to honestly talk about the main problem with UJ and Gar-you. One wise old elder stood up and spoke about jealousy and love. She said that while it was good to have the men, the result would be fights and insults, which they never had when the men weren't there. She suggested that each man should marry half of the women. The women got mad and started yelling at the elder and at each other, as each woman felt she was the one her man loved. The elders asked everyone to go home, saying they would figure out something later. Meanwhile, the men were in their rooms feeling really sad because they did not want to be kicked out of this island. They wanted to stay there for the rest of their lives. As the elders tried to figure out what to do next, they soon realized that all the women were getting morning sickness or had started having big bellies. The men continued their romances with the women, and the fights and insults continued. Soon there was chaos everywhere, but it became clear that everyone was expecting babies, even the leaders. An emergency meeting was called. This time, the women were not allowed to speak as the wise elder talked. She reminded them of the importance of forgiveness and urged them to put aside their jealousy for the sake of the community and the babies on the way. She suggested that instead of fighting over the men, they should focus on helping each other and start preparing for the arrival of the babies. She acknowledged that they had not had babies in the village for over 30 years and that all the pregnant women would be first-time mothers. So they would have a lot to learn from the elders and should focus on themselves and the babies. At this point, people started working together for the arrival of the babies. They realized that it was a blessing to be expecting these babies. They organized themselves with the help of the elders. Some were responsible for baby clothing, baby baskets, food, midwifery, and newborn medicine, and they enjoyed doing it. The men also worked very hard to make the baby cribs and whatever else they were asked to do to support the women. The midwives' team worked nonstop to deliver the babies. When the babies arrived, it made the women even closer. They put aside their differences and worked together as mothers to take care of the babies. The female chief had twin girls, and the traditional leader had a handsome baby boy. The villagers happily welcomed the new babies into their midst. The women danced and celebrated and were together again. They all thanked the men for giving them such beautiful gifts. They knew that if they worked together, they could solve any problem, including what to do with UJ and Gar-you. But for now, their focus was on the babies, and they cared less about the men. The men were able to relax and figure out their plans for staying on the island, as they had been too busy before.